I can't drink, if I try to drink Vedic style, it'll be like the rainy season in Mayapur. So, forgive me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 This is Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, text 21. Yad yada charati shreshtas.
Yad yada charati shreshtas.
Tatta devetaro jana.
Tatta devetaro jana.
Sayat pramanam kurute.
Sayat pramanam kurute.
Lokastaranu vartate.
Lokastaranu vartate.
I'll go right to the translation by Srila Prabhupada. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. It's a pretty short purport, so I'll read. People in general always require a leader who can teach the public for practical behavior. A leader cannot teach the public to stop smoking if he himself smokes. Lord Chaitanya said that a teacher should behave properly before he begins teaching. One who teaches in that way is called a charya, or the ideal teacher. Therefore, a teacher must follow the principles of Shastra, scripture, to teach the common man. The teacher cannot manufacture rules against the principles of revealed scriptures. The revealed scriptures, like Manu Samhita and similar others, are considered the standard books to be followed by human society. Thus, the leader's teaching should be based on the principles of such standard shastras. One who desires to improve himself must follow the standard rules as they are practiced by the great teachers. The Srimad Bhagavatam also affirms that one should follow in the footsteps of great devotees, and that is the way of progress on the path of spiritual realization. The king, or the executive head of state, the father, and the school teacher are all considered to be natural leaders of the innocent people in general. All such natural leaders have a great responsibility to their dependents. Therefore, they must be conversant with standard books of moral and spiritual codes. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavani Paschacha Shadishatarane Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. 3 times for emphasis, we say. Thank you, Nilamani Prabhu, for the opportunity for me to purify my consciousness. I ask for the blessings of all the assembled devotees here. I might be able to say something worthwhile. I tend to speak foolishly a lot, so I hope not to do that too much here. Early December 2001, I came to this very room for a Sunday feast, and it was just a few days after George Harrison left his body. Is anyone not familiar with George Harrison? Raise your hand. Not familiar with George Harrison? We've all heard of George Harrison. Okay. Vrindavan Chandra Prabhu approached me before the program started, and he said, because he knew that I was very big into the Beatles and into George Harrison, and he asked me, would you speak a little bit about George for us? And I had laryngitis that day. For that week, actually, I had laryngitis. And I couldn't really speak above a minor whisper. So I couldn't do it. I said, I could whisper it to you and you could speak it, and he wasn't comfortable with it. So I didn't do it then. But I have a chance to do it now. A few days ago would have been George's 77th birthday. 77th birthday. So instead of speaking after his passing, leaving his body, I'm going to speak after his birth into that body. He was quite an extraordinary person. He was a great man in many ways, but not because he was such a successful musician, and he was part of the most successful rock and roll group of all time, but that he was sincerely seeking the truth. And when he found it, he sincerely lived it. And that's sort of the journey for all of us, right? We're here. We may be here for some perfunctory reason. Perhaps we feel it's an obligation to show our faces to the deities, or that's what you do. On Sunday, you go to the temple. If you have small goals, that's fine, that's good. If you have bigger goals, that's not quite enough. So we have to live a path of love. We have to live a path of bhakti, and that's what George would consistently talk about in his songs nearing the end of the Beatle period and throughout his entire solo career until the day he left his body. There were brahmacharis living here when I first came around, and one of them told me later, months after I had started coming here regularly, that the day I came, he was up in the room at the top of the stairs where the window faces the front, and he was just chanting japa, looking out there. And as I indicated before, I had very long hair, like down here. And I was wearing a black leather jacket, and I was walking up the stairs because I was looking. I knew George was involved in the Krishnas, and I wanted to be a spiritual person. And although I knew he was involved in it, that didn't make me automatically want to do it. But I sort of accepted it as cool, because growing up in the 70s and throughout the 80s, the Hare Krishnas were pretty much a punchline. They were a joke to the general mass of people. A lot of misunderstanding going on. So I never fell prey to that mentality, because if George is involved with it, there must be some validity to it. And I read a few of the things that he said, and I thought it was very interesting, and it piqued my spiritual curiosity, but not enough to actually do anything, until I got to a point in my life where I kind of wanted to know more. So I went looking for devotees, which is a little backwards. It's usually the Krishnas go out and find people. I was kind of looking for them to ask questions, and somehow I found Towaco. And I'm walking up these steps, and the brahmachari was chanting and looking out, and he told me later, he said, when I saw you walking up the steps, I said, George brought another one. And that's kind of true. since we're kind of long announcements, I'm going to just jump into something here. The first song about God that George ever wrote, and he wrote many. He wrote songs about reincarnation and karma and death and samsara. I mean, he was all over, and the miseries of material life. The first song he ever wrote about God is this little obscure Beatles song on the White Album. And it was a double album, and when we had vinyl, it was what we called side 3. And it was just after this blistering rock and roll piece called Helter Skelter. And this song is very meek, and it kind of sneaks up on you. And it's called Long, Long, Long. An odd title, Long, Long, Long. And I'm going to read you the lyrics here. It's been a long, long, long time. How could I ever have lost you when I loved you? This is the dilemma of the jiva. Once we recognize what our journey has been thus far, it's a little humiliating and embarrassing if you think about it, because we're not when we're born into this body, into this world, we're not created at that point. We're eternal, and eternal doesn't just mean no end. It means no end and no beginning. So that's ever existing. So we've existed, but where did we exist? Initially with Krishna in the spiritual world, in the spiritual sky. And things are great there. And people often sort of debate and talk about, like, how could we fall if things were so perfect there? We all have free will, and it's really easy to understand if you think about something dumb you've done in your life. I mean, I can think of tons of things where, like, I have it good, but I'm curious enough to try something that's not so good for me. And I try it, and I suffer the consequences. So George is lamenting his own choice. How could I ever have lost you? And he's taking responsibility for that. I lost you, you didn't lose me. It's not, some systems of thought say that God creates us and puts us in this material world, and then we work our way back to God. We work our way to God. But why would he put us in such a dangerous place? He wouldn't do it by his own choice. But if we choose it, he'll give us that free will, and he'll let us act on that. So here George is falling back in love with Krishna. How could I ever have lost you when I loved you? And I did love you. And now we're so covered up with material layers upon layers of conditioning that we have to find that love again. Sometimes it feels like a chore, like we have to force ourselves to love Krishna. That's not the case. We just have to peel away layers of contamination. Like Krishna says in the Gita, just wiping the dust off the mirror, because it's not a clear reflection. But if we can just wipe away those layers of contamination, then the love is there. And even before we're completely clean, we can glimpse that love. We can feel that love, because it's so strong, it's so powerful. It'll make its way through, if not fully, just bit by bit, until finally it can burst through and leave all that other dust behind. And we just fly forward back to Krishna in the spiritual sky, and everything else is behind us. It took a long, long, long time. Now I'm so happy I found you. How I love you. He says, so many tears I was searching. So many tears I was wasting. Srila Madhvacharya said that each soul has shed enough tears since time immemorial to fill an ocean. So some people say, like, well, if there is reincarnation, how come I don't remember my past life? That's pure mercy on the part of Krishna. Because it's kind of cool to know who you were in a past life. But if we had memories of all our lifetimes, the pain far outweighs any kind of, coolness of knowing who I was, or even the joy. There's joy in this world, but it pales in comparison to the pain that is afforded us in this world. So he's searching. And what do we search for while we're here? We search for Krishna. In the foreword to the Krishna book, George talks about his first lines. He says, everybody is looking for Krishna. Some don't realize that they are, but they are. And I remember the first time I read that, I thought it was a little pompous and obnoxious. You know, he's telling everybody what they're looking for, even if they don't say they're looking for it. But it's true. I came to realize that it's really true. We don't identify it as such, but we're all seeking pleasure. We're all looking for happiness and joy. And what we don't understand is that happiness, joy, and pleasure, that is God. Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure. He's the source of all happiness and joy. There is no joy, no happiness, and no pleasure outside of Krishna. He says in the Gita, anything worthwhile in this world is a spark of his splendor. He invests certain things so that we derive pleasure from them, or joy or happiness. But by dint of the nature of the material world, it's not lasting. So we end up suffering after that. Sometimes also we search for Krishna directly in specific things. In the first chapter of the Gita, the 10th verse, Yadunath says, "Our strength is immeasurable, and we are perfectly protected by grandfather Bhishma, whereas the strength of the Pandavas, carefully protected by Bhima, is limited." But the truth of the matter is that's his perception. And Prabhupada goes on to say that his conclusion that they would come out of the battle victorious was well ascertained. By material calculation, it was well ascertained. He looked, he evaluated Bhishma Dev, and Bhima says, we've got what it takes. But the truth is their strength is actually limited. And the strength of the Pandavas is immeasurable, because the Pandavas had Krishna. So Duryodhana was looking to Bhishma for his protection and for his solace. So have you ever thought about what do we do? Where do we go for protection? Do we go to Krishna for protection? Maybe sometimes. Probably not all the time. You all are so pious, maybe it is all the time. But many of us look everywhere except toward God for protection. Maybe it's for somebody that we really know who's really intelligent. So you're seeking the shelter of someone's intelligence. Or maybe it's our own intelligence that we think we're bright enough to get through this. Maybe it's television. Maybe your Bhishma Dev is television. Maybe our Bhishma Dev is comfort foods. Maybe it's ice cream. Maybe it's potatoes. I'm getting hungry. Anyway, we seek protection and shelter in a lot of material places, and they might provide it, but the thing is, they only will provide it momentarily. And that becomes problematic. So he goes on and says, "Now I can see you. How can I ever misplace you? How I want you. Oh, I love you. You know that I need you. Oh, I love you." It's very powerful. And these are not material longings. These are the longings of the soul. And it's that eagerness that he's displayed again and again in his music. My Sweet Lord is probably the most popular song. It's very, there are two short verses. All the lyrics in that song basically, oh my Lord, my sweet Lord, I really want to see you. I really want to be with you. I really want to see you, Lord, but it takes so long, my Lord. It's love. And if you hear it, you can hear in his voice the yearning. And to get to that point where your yearning is sincere, completely sincere, and that's like all you want. I really want to see you. It's not like I have to go to the temple, I'm going to look at the deities, and they're beautiful today, It starts there, and it's a great place to start, but it's got to build and build and build until finally, I really want to see you. That's the love in separation that Prabhupada often talks about. It takes so long. It takes so long. The gopis bemoan Lord Brahma for making the eyes blink, because in that time, they can't see Krishna. And that to them is the biggest dilemma. So then that's a whole verse. And then the other verse in My Sweet Lord is, I really want to know you. I really want to go with you. I really want to show you, Lord, that it won't take long, my Lord. And so those two verses he repeats and repeats. And then he throws in the Maha Mantra. So first he says it takes so long, it's that love and separation. But then he says, I want to show you that it won't take long. And this is the two fingers in the Damodar Leela story, where Mother Yasoda tries to bind Krishna. But no matter how many ropes she attaches, it's always two fingers too short. One finger represents what? Krishna's mercy. And the other finger represents our endeavor. Right? So he's again sincerely, I really want to show you, Lord, that it won't take long. I'm going to do it in this lifetime. I want you now. I want you here. I want you now. Oh, how I love you. You know that I need you. Oh, I love you. I really want to see you. I really want to be with you. We have to... I've heard Shyam Sundar Prabhu, who was actually a close friend of George's, talk about how George was realized at such a young age. And I thought, wow, he must be exaggerating. I don't know what the case is, but I do know that to hear him sing about Krishna with such love in his heart, that he was quite advanced. So just so I can end on time, I'll just skip around here. George was never an initiated devotee, and he had his fingers in a lot of spiritual pies. He was extremely non sequitur, and that came to ISKCON as well. He loved Srila Prabhupada. He was also very, very close friends with another mentor of his, Ravi Shankar, who I think is a Shivite. So Shyam Sundar Prabhu created a murti of Lord Shiva, because Shyam Sundar is also, among many other talents, a sculptor. He sculpted a murti of Lord Shiva for George's garden. So he had respect for all the demigods. Krishna was his main love, and the Hare Krishna mantra was his main mantra. But his meetings with Srila Prabhupada influenced him in a great way. And in 1973, he had an album called Living in the Material World. And I was going to talk about that song. Maybe I'll just read a little bit of it. I was going to play a little bit, but I don't think I'll have time. But this is what we call an old school vinyl record album. And I brought this specifically because it has more impact. So it's kind of like mystical looking on the front. But it's a gatefold album, which means it opens up. And inside, let's do it this way. It's got this insert which contains the lyrics of the songs. And this is the back with Omkara. And on the front, have you ever seen this picture before? So this was released, this was a #1 album all over the world. So millions and millions of people bought this and looked at this. What a cool picture. And this opens up and the lyrics are there. And on the back here it says, all glories to Sri Krishna. So he was really, my sweet Lord, he says, he brought me out of the closet as a Krishna devotee. He put his career on the line, really, taking such a stand, like, yes, because it could be looked at as kind of, I don't know, something to express your love for God. But he was slightly concerned at first, but then unafraid to do so. And the songs on the Living in the Material World album are unabashedly devotional. They're bhajans, basically. And very directly. The Lord loves the one who loves the Lord, the light that has lighted the world. Be Here Now is a famous book by Ram Das, and he made a song out of it. And just to go through some of the lyrics of Living in the Material World, I'll say there's a part in that song where the music kind of comes to a stop, and there's just a flute solo that just lasts like 2 bars. It's very quick. Da 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 da. And I remember growing up, and it would give me tingles down my back listening to that flute solo, and I didn't know why, but I came to learn why, and I'll tell you where that comes in. So he says, I'm living in the material world, living in the material world. Can't say what I'm doing here, but I hope to see much clearer after living in the material world. And that's what we're here for, right? Is to get our vision back, our clear vision. Yes, I got born into the material world, getting worn out in the material world. Use my body like a car, taking me both near and far. In the Gita, Krishna says that we're as a soul, we're just on a machine going through this world. Met my friends all in the material world. Met them all here in the material world. John and Paul here in the material world. Though we started out quite poor, we got Richie on a tour and got caught up in the material world. John and Paul, John Lennon, Paul McCartney. Richie is Ringo Starr. His real name is Richard Starkey. So he's referencing his life as a Beatle. And I got caught up in the material world. So he got blinded. But what he did was amazing because he had everything you could want. What do you want out of life? Whatever it is. What do you want out of life? Whatever it is. What do you want? He had it all. If it's money, if it's women or men, if it's booze and ways to alter your consciousness, he had it all. And speaking of altering your consciousness, he did talk about using drugs. It was the 60s. And he talks about using LSD in a positive light, I'll tell you. But he was very quick to remind us that it was a good thing for him because when he was on LSD, he had, and this was before he met devotees, he had the experience that he's not his body. His consciousness got raised to a point where he kind of left his body and he could see the working. So he was convinced after an LSD trip that it wasn't his body. But he came to learn, he explains, that LSD was useful in that regard. It asked all the right questions. However, it was ultimately a dead end because it didn't supply any of the answers to the questions. But those questions would drive him for the rest of his life. And upon meeting the devotees and Srila Prabhupada, he got the answers to his questions. So he didn't need to do that, so he left those intoxicants behind. But he definitely was steeped in the material world. One thing he said was, when you've had all these experiences, met all the famous people, made some money, toured the world, and got all the acclaim, right? Name, fame, and acclaim. We're all after it in one way or another. You still think, is that it? Some people might be satisfied with that, but I wasn't, and I'm still not. Then he sings, from the spiritual sky, such sweet memories have I. To the spiritual sky, how I pray, yes I pray, that I won't get lost and go astray. So again here, from the spiritual sky, I started out there. I have such sweet memories of a good place. And now, in the material world, back to the spiritual sky. From the spiritual sky to the spiritual sky. That's the journey of the jiva. How I pray, yes I pray that I won't get lost or go astray. And Krishna says in the Gita, once you come back, it's once bitten, twice shy. You won't be coming back to this material world. So he says, as I'm fated for the material world, get frustrated in the material world, there's no satisfaction here. Senses never gratified, only swelling like a tide that could drown me in the material world. Then, while I'm living in the material world, not much giving in the material world, it's a selfish place. Got a lot of work to do, try to get a message through and get back out of this material world. Again, at the end of the Gita, Krishna talks about sharing this message with devotees. Sharing this message, purifying themselves and our own selves, will get us back out of the material world. So then the last verse he says, I'm living in the material world, living in the material world. I hope to get out of this place by the Lord Sri Krishna's grace. He just on the nose. I hope to get out of this place by the Lord Sri Krishna's grace. And the music hangs suspended and the flute goes ba-da-da, ba-da-da. And it's just exhilarating freedom to the spiritual sky. My salvation from the material world, he sings. His original line, which he changed to hope to get out of this place by the Lord Sri Krishna's grace, was got to get out of this mess by my Krishna consciousness. Okay, so I'll just wrap up here. I wanted to just read, three brief things. One is, this is Here Comes the Sun, the spiritual and musical journey of George Harrison, written by Joshua M. Green, our own Yogeshwar Prabhu, who recorded with George Harrison and the Beatles on the Radha Krishna Temple album. This is just an exchange George's last exchange with Srila Prabhupada. It was in the summer of 1976. So Prabhupada says, if that is Krishna's desire, the teacher said, he preferred to travel, teaching wherever he could. But that said, it was not in his hands. Oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to start here. Okay. Prabhupada said, this is the ideal. If at the time of death one can remember Krishna, then his whole life is successful. Immediately he goes to Krishna. George said, when my mother died, I had to send my sister and father out of the room because they were getting emotional, and I just chanted Hare Krishna. She could hear? Prabhupada asked. I don't know, George said. She was in a coma or something. It was the only thing I could think of, the only thing that may be of value, you know. Prabhupada nodded. If she heard Hare Krishna, she will get the benefit. So let us practice in such a way that at the time of death we may remember. That is success. Prabhupada thanked George, saying that because of his example, many others were now chanting. What a great man does, common men follow. George turned away. I don't think it's on my account. So humble. Prabhupada assured him that it was so, and looked to his disciples for confirmation. A London devotee said letters arrived regularly from people around the world who had taken to chanting after hearing George's records. George shifted on his cushion. Subduing his ego, not inflating it, had become his avowed goal. Still, he had achieved something unprecedented, and he appreciated Prabhupada's wanting him to know how much it meant. My own Guru Maharaj said, apart from Prabhupada, George Harrison did the most to spread Krishna consciousness around the world. And Prabhupada thought so much of George. He called him a really nice boy. And when Prabhupada was leaving his body, he took off his ring, one of his rings, and he gave it to his disciples. And he asked them to please make sure George gets this. And George got his ring. So just a few of the things, just a few of the highlights of what George did. When the devotees first went to England and met George, George became the guarantor for the lease of the Bury Place Temple. They couldn't get it unless they had collateral, something to back it up. So George signed it, okay, if they can't pay it, I'll pay it. He financed and wrote the foreword for the Krishna book. We have the Krishna book because of his generosity. He donated the manor to ISKCON on one condition, that it always be used as a Krishna temple. Devotee said, you got it, George. He recorded the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, recorded the devotees singing it. The devotees asked him, it's like, why don't you record it? You know, it'll be so big. And he says, no, I want you to record it. So he produced the record, they recorded it, became a number one all over Europe and in other places. In the United States, it was top 5. And then they did the Radha Krishna Temple album, whole album. And finally, when he did leave his body in November 29th, 2001, the family issued this statement. George left this world the way he lived in it, conscious of God, fearless of death, and at peace, surrounded by family and friends. He often said, love one another, and everything else can wait, but the search for God cannot wait. Let's remember that. Let's remember that when we're turning on Netflix, which is no crime to turn on Netflix. But let's just remember that the search for God can never wait. So when we do come to the temple, let's give our hearts to the deities and not see it as an obligation or just something that I do on Sundays. But just every week, every day, a little bit more, give our hearts to Krishna so that we can reach success also in this life. Thank you for your kind attention.
Question or comment? Anyone?
Any quick comment? Yes, sir.
Quick comment and a question. sort of comment is something you said just at the